Healing the mother wound isn't just about surviving. It's about becoming the person you always needed. In this episode, Micah Larsen joins me for a real, raw, and healing conversation, all about doing just that. Welcome to Blumera Podcast, and welcome to part 3 of the Mother Wound series. I'm your host, Brianne, and today I am joined by writer and mother, Micah Larsen, who shares her journey of healing generational trauma while raising her child with love, intention, and fierce compassion. We talk about complex PTSD, emotional neglect, reparenting ourselves while parenting our children, and what it really looks like to choose healing, even when it's hard. If you're navigating motherhood or cycle breaking yourself, this conversation is for you. Let's get right into the call. Do you mind telling me a little bit about your mother wound or what that relationship looked like, or maybe still does?
Oh, yeah. So I maintain a pretty close relationship with my parents still. And I've even done some trauma therapy with my parents, with my therapist, which we had to keep it to like one session a month because it was so much. But I can say I'm really grateful that my mom will come to the table to talk about this after years of kind of conflict over it. But my mom is an immigrant. She's from Germany, and her parents are World War II survivors. And that really shows in her background. She also comes from a very emotionally and physically abusive dynamic. And so she had the kind of childhood where she just had to survive. And she didn't really work on her own wounds before she had me and my sister. And so she came to motherhood with really just having to get through the day every day. And her unhealed wounds showed up a lot. And that meant that she did her best, but she was pretty unequipped and unable to shelter us from abuse. And her emotional needs were never met. And so I met her emotional needs to the large extent because I'm the eldest daughter.
That's a typical role. I find it
Right?
impressive that she was willing to go to trauma therapy with you and
Yeah.
hear and maybe talk about those things with you. Although I know
Yeah.
that's an extra added hurdle for you in processing, both good and bad.
Yeah, it opened up so many wounds for me, but I know I have a lot of friends whose parents would not come to the table to talk about that. And we've done a lot of work. We've put a pause on our family trauma therapy, but it's made a lot of progress. She actually started going to therapy herself this year.
Wow.
So she's doing her own work. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, my
Yeah.
mother was emotionally neglectful and just never around. She eventually just abandoned the family, and she got stage 4 cancer, knew she was going to pass, never made amends, never discussed anything, was so in denial and refusing to discuss any issues. So I can understand that. I found a lot of healing after she passed, but it would have been nice to have some of those conversations and be able to not just be dismissed or rejected in that way, you know? It's hard
Yeah.
either way, not downplaying your situation at all.
No, I mean, there are multiple situations in which like our moms are not able to give us what they need
Mhm.
and like whether they're physically present or not. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I have a complex post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis. And one thing I learned is that reading about emotional neglect is that people who study C-PTSD have said that it's almost easier if you were physically abused because emotional neglect is so hard to put your finger on because you don't know what has happened if you never got what you needed, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I'm a CPSD sister too.
Are you okay? Yeah.
Oh, and I can absolutely relate. Like, you don't know what you're missing because you didn't have it and you didn't have the example, and your baseline is so far from what is healthy and normal that it's hard to see anything different. I know, like, even when I'm parenting, I have 2 little kids. I'm like, I didn't have an example for this. I don't know what to do next for myself or for my kids sometimes. So I can completely relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
2 and 4.
Yeah. Okay. So like such big developmental stages too.
Oh,
That's so challenging.
it's such big feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so hard. And I should say I'm not a therapist. I have been in therapy for a long time. I'm a writer and I write about this stuff. So I'm on the like descriptive end, not the prescriptive end.
Yeah, no, I think there's a definite need for that. So you've already kind of mentioned how your mother wounds impact you now. How have those manifested in adulthood for you?
That's a great question. So they've mostly manifested after I became a mom, and my son is 6. I really noticed that when he was between 18 months and 2, when he started to become like his independent, his own little guy, you start having to like make choices about how you're going to interact with them when they're making their own independent decisions. And like some people say that's discipline, or like you just have to make more active parenting choices about like the way you engage with your kid. And I realized this is so hard for me. Now I know it was really triggering because I grew up in a dynamic where my parents used shame to parent me in fear. And I instinctively like did not want to do that, but I also didn't know what to do instead. Of course, I didn't realize that at the time. It was just like I was plagued by anxiety. And now I know, yeah, it's really hard to like go from a script that hasn't been written for you. Like you said, we're kind of like rewriting the pattern here. If you didn't get what you needed as a child and you're trying to give that to your kids, it's like I feel like I was doing double the work sometimes because I was trying to like work on my own stuff and regulate myself while helping teach my child to regulate. And it just became really apparent when he was 2.
It's definitely a tough age. I feel it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Especially I live across the country from my parents and like they would be on FaceTime with him. I'm like such a cliche eldest daughter in that I'm like want to please them and like be emotional support. And I was always like the emotional caretaker. Like my trauma type, according to C-PTSD, is super nurse. So I'm like need to make everybody happy and feel good. And so, on FaceTime with my parents a lot, especially during the pandemic. And I noticed my anxiety was just off the chain, especially like having their voices talking about my parenting. And I started therapy around then.
That's so good, though. I mean, it's not good that
Yeah.
you were experiencing that. And it makes sense, though, to hear critiques of your parenting when you struggled with their parenting.
Definitely the most memorable time was an argument I got in with my dad, specifically about my son's sleep. My son was born prematurely. He's just never slept through the night. Like he just started sleeping through the night in the last few months. And yeah, he just turned 6. So like I was exhausted all the time, especially like when he was 2. I was working on how do I help him sleep through the night just so I can like get a rest. But I'm also not going to let him cry it out because it just felt really deeply wrong for my nervous system. And so I would get up with him, 6 times a night or whatever. And after I put him to bed, when my parents were at my house, my dad was just so irate at me for not locking the door to my kid's room and like letting him cry it out. And he said like, I'm being too soft on him, on my son. And I didn't consciously like make the choice, Brian, to like stand up to him in that moment. But it was the first time in my life that I stood on the stairs and like blocked his way up the staircase to my son's room. And I was like, this is my house and this is my child. And it became emotional and physical altercation. But it was like becoming a mom gave me what I needed to stand up. And I don't think that I could have ever healed from it without becoming a mom, if that makes sense.
It does. It
Yeah.
kind of helps you see outside of yourself. I didn't
Yeah.
understand reparenting myself until I had a child to put in that place and say, okay, what would I do for my child? And how can I do that for myself? Like it just didn't make sense to me because I didn't know what my needs were. I didn't know how to nurture myself. But once I had my own child, I knew what I wanted for them. And it became easier and it made more sense of what I needed to do for myself.
Isn't that so crazy? Like, did you have the experience of I'm saying these kind and supportive and validating things to my kid? And then like, okay, now you have that skill set and then you can speak to yourself like that?
Exactly. Yes.
So wild.
I grew my emotional intelligence and my ability to emotionally regulate along with them by teaching them. I had to learn the vocabulary, give it to them, and then it was through modeling it to them that it was like practice for myself and a muscle that like strengthened over time just by teaching them and educating them. It was like what taught me.
Yes. And that is like you're working overtime,
Mhm.
right? Like your brain, and it
Oh,
is
absolutely.
exhausting.
Mhm.
It's so exhausting. I think about, yeah, like what's going on in our brains because you're trying to like learn how to regulate your emotions and teach them at the same time. And while it's super healing, it's like the most demanding exercise.
Absolutely. It feels like double the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if you're trying to navigate being triggered, like when you were talking about letting your kids cry it out, I know my parents let me cry it out. And it was deeply triggering for me to hear my kids crying and to not do something, to not act on it. Even to be in a situation where I'm like in the bathroom and I just need 30 seconds. It was deeply triggering. And I didn't relate it to myself being in that position, but it would bring up stuff like that. And it would feel even more intense for me to get back and help them co-regulate and feel better.
Yeah. Isn't it so clear when you're looking back? Like, that's why that was so deeply hard. And like, our nervous systems are all over the place when you hear your kid crying. And it's not just because you are a good mom and your instinct is to help your child, but it's like, oh, this is opening up. It's like ripping a scab off of your wound. And yeah, on the advice of a colleague, I tried the Ferber method when my son was, I don't know, 6 months old. And my husband was a physician. He was working 100 hours a week and he worked nights a lot of times. And so I was really doing this alone, as a lot of moms do. But I would just sit outside my son's room on the carpet and just bawl my eyes out as silently as I could while I was giving him like the 30 seconds, 1 minute of like trying to let him. But I realized this is a skill that, in retrospect, I realized like self-regulation is a skill that we have to teach. And like, your baby doesn't have my baby didn't have the ability to do that, but my own trauma was making it so hard to deal with. I just remember like the physical feeling
Yes. And
of
it's
that.
like when you're triggered, your brain doesn't have the same capacity for reasoning and looking inward and trying to find the root of it. You are in like alarms ringing. Your whole body is reacting. I mean, you're in a trauma response, and it does make it 10 times harder to try to navigate that moment or even to see how urgent that moment really is. I know my therapist at that time, especially when they were babies, my second one was really colicky, and I struggled with that. No matter what I did, he would cry and it felt like I couldn't make him feel better. And it was really painful on me. And she would kind of be like, okay, like if this is a fire station, what kind of emergency is this? Do you need to go just get a cat out of a tree, or is like a house on fire? And it helped me to be like, okay, what kind of emergency? And like just tell my body, okay, I don't need to run. I can walk there. It's not the end of the world, because it feels like I've seen a trend on social media or Instagram, I don't really remember where it's like my body can't tell the difference between my child crying or me being chased by a tiger.
Yeah, absolutely not. Your brain is just like working in the same way, like for alarm. I think mom instincts are so fascinating. My background is in social science and academic research, and I don't know like the empiric validity of this, but I know that those instincts, like the superpowers that I felt like I had starting the day that he was born, are so powerful. You hear about like moms lifting a car off of their children. It's like, that's so real. That's so real.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just doesn't make sense. I know sometimes my intuition, I'm like, I don't know why I need to do this, but like I need to do this, or the baby needs this. And I don't know how to tell you how I know that. But
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. When my son was in the NICU, I could smell him from the other end of the hall. Like, as soon as I entered the NICU ward, he was in the last room at the end of the hall, and I could smell him. And I could, like a bloodhound, I could have like found him anywhere. It's just so,
yeah,
so wild.
I bet he could smell you. You hear
Yeah.
that they know your smell, and that's kind of why your chemistry changes and like your armpits smell a little bit more. And
Yeah. Yeah. The nurses would say when I walked in the room and started talking, like he would calm down. They'd page me if he was crying. And like as soon as I walked in the room, I was like, that being an entrance to motherhood was really powerful.
yeah. What were some of the biggest fears or challenges that came up for you because you didn't have a secure mother figure?
That is a really good question. I think like we said, it's really demanding to try to heal your own wounds while you are trying to parent your child, like emotional regulation. Or my son runs a little bit anxious. He got that from me, like nature and nurture. But for example, he does gymnastics, and just this last weekend, he was like a little nervous to go back, and he hadn't been in a couple weeks because he had the flu, and he did not want to go out on the floor with his group. And I started getting anxious. Like I could feel it in my body, starting to get like tense and shallow breathing, and my head is racing. He's starting to talk about, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And so like now I recognize, all right, I need to regulate myself and like get myself under control so that I can be big enough to hold his anxiety too. But it used to just be that I would like shut myself down and try to help him. And now I know, okay, I need to do some box breathing, and I need to like let myself settle. And then I'm going to be clear of mind enough and like present enough to tell him, hey, buddy, I hear that you're feeling really scared. Would it help you if I went out there with you? And like not give an F about what other parents think about me, like my kid needing me to be out on the floor with him. I'm the only parent out there
Mhm.
next to the foam pit or whatever. But I see my kid and he looks out there and sees me standing right there, like giving him a thumbs up.
Oh.
And afterward, he's like, you're the only reason that I could do that today. And it's like, that's why.
Mhm.
Okay. That's like, I couldn't have done that if I was really stuck in my own anxiety. And I spent years trying to battle my way out of it. And I know I have a lot of perfectionism and really unreasonable standards for myself as a mom because I'm like so afraid to damage him.
Oh, absolutely. When you felt that, I personally fear becoming my mom. Like anytime I need a break, I'm like, oh my God, I'm abandoning my children. I'm
Yep.
abandoning motherhood and my role. And it took my friend and past roommate, Bethany, to say that every time you leave and come back, you're showing them you're different and you're breaking a cycle and you're instilling that trust in them that you're going to always come back. And I was like, oof, I needed to hear that.
That is so good. Like I need to write that down. I need to like have that on a post-it note because there's a lot of mom guilt. Yeah, there's so much guilt that comes with like taking a break or, for me, it was like I didn't meet my own needs for years and it took a tremendous toll. And that, yeah, I guess seeing you come back or seeing you as mom take care of yourself in fundamental ways is really an important message to send too, right?
Because you want that
Had
for
to learn
them,
that.
right?
Yeah. And to model that rest is not lazy.
Mhm.
That was a message that was explicitly drilled into me as a child, and that your only value really came from achievement and productivity. And if you were lazy, you were bad. So now it's like, this is something I'm working on, Brienne, is being good at resting and allowing myself to like slow down and not have to do, like, okay, you don't have to do something
Mhm.
right now. Like you can just sit on the floor and play Legos, which without thinking about like your grocery list, or it's hard, but
So hard.
rest is productive. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want him to think that his only value comes from like what he can produce.
Or get done. I know that like
Yeah.
it is hard sometimes to just sit down and play. I'm like, oh, but I could do dishes first, or like I could put a load of laundry in so that way I'm doing something while I'm playing with them. And there's real power in just saying, no, that stuff can wait. Connection and rest and play or whatever feels good in the moment is more important right now.
Yeah. I heard a wise woman somewhere say a few years ago, like when you have that feeling of I should get up and start the dishwasher or like fold laundry while he's playing Legos or something, like when you have that should, stop and think, like, do I want to do this and do I need to do this? And if neither of those are true, then give yourself permission to not do it in the moment. And that's been helpful. It's something I struggle with enormously still, though. I'm like baby steps.
Yeah, it's not a should. Thank you, wise woman somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Dang, I wish I could credit her. I have no idea where.
How do you find ways to be compassionate with yourself when you find yourself repeating patterns or almost going down a path that feels similar to how you were parented? Because I know for myself, my mother was very avoidant, and my tendency is to be avoidant and to avoid to go into my room and process if my husband's around to take care of the kids. And it takes a lot for me to find self-compassion in those moments and to shut down the voices that are like, you are repeating what you had and you're damaging your children and you're becoming your mother. How do you find ways to be compassionate?
Oh, this is like the last 2 years have been a huge struggle in me learning this. And again, I think I'm in the beginning stages of really getting good at self-compassion. And I actually think like I've only been able to achieve it in the last year because I have some fun little side quests, medical side quests, but like what?
Odd way to put it. I just giggled at side quest.
Oh, yeah, I know. I guess like, yeah, that's the way I like to think about it. But
It was a
those
great
really forced
reframe.
me. Yeah, okay, yeah, we're reframing. We're reframing. And those really forced me to think about what is important to me. I'll just get right down to it. In December, I was in the mental hospital for a while. And wow, did I have to really learn about self-compassion then. And it was my decision to be there because I had been suicidal before several times. The first time I was 9 or 10 years old and several times since then, but my mental health really was challenged after I had a miscarriage miscarriage after I had my son. I had postpartum anxiety and depression, and it was not well managed or treated. And because I thought I can just get through it and I just need to stop being a little bitch and I just need to like grit my way through it. And that was just like how I've always done everything. Yeah, like, yeah, I'm strong as fuck and I don't need anyone. And I'm like really good at dissociating. Actually, I didn't know that then. Now I know that now.
Yeah.
And like to a fault, I just pushed myself to just grit my way through stuff. And that's the opposite of self-compassion, is being able to notice like I'm having a hard time. It's okay to have a hard time and you can just give yourself a break, including like not beating yourself up. And this winter, I noticed that I was having a lot of thoughts of, I just want to sleep forever. And my son is really what's keeping me alive. And that's not the first time I felt that, but this is the first time that I had the strength to call a friend and say, I need you to come here right now. And she knew what I was saying because I finally had the courage to ask for help from my friends and tell them this is where I'm at. And she came when I called, and I went to the emergency room, and I went from there to the mental hospital. And that is an exercise in, wow, self-examining, like really doing an inventory of stuff that you need to address. And one of those is like, I'm still so hard on myself. And I've been in trauma therapy since 2021. So 4 years. And one of the most basic, simple things I've learned in trauma therapy is that I just need to notice when I'm really triggered. And I thought that was just like the most basic thing. And I was like, okay, like I notice when I'm feeling anxious, or like I'm noticing that I'm feeling depressed, or like I notice that I'm triggered. And now I'm like, I notice that I'm feeling abandoned. That seems like such a small thing. Noticing that I'm being really hard on myself, noticing that I feel like I need to be productive. But that was the only way to get to a point of being able to do something about it, is noticing I'm feeling triggered. And then thinking like the next step being, what about this feels familiar? A lot of times it's like, this is a lesson I learned in my childhood, or I was punished for this. And I think like noticing seems so simple, but just noticing like my chest feels tight, my body is rigid, my mind is racing, I'm breathing shallow, I'm going to have a panic attack. Like notice the anxiety. I'm eventually able to do something about it. That was a really rambling answer.
No, it was great. And it shows that it's not actually simple. It's really complex.
No.
And it feels simple, but it's so powerful. And it takes a lot to get to that point. Because I know when I started trauma therapy, especially for my triggers in motherhood, it was like, how am I supposed to notice the second I get triggered? I didn't even notice, like I would start holding my breath, or, if my body feels tense, but you're dissociated from your body, you're disconnected from your body, you don't feel it, because that's the whole point.
Yes. And like the dissociation, especially if you've done it since you were a little kid, like it's part of you, and it's a really powerful and effective way to deal with your surroundings, right? And if it's been a part of you for so long, it's like really hard to notice it yourself. You don't know any different. And it's like, it's protected you for a long time. And my mom has powerful dissociation. She doesn't remember things when she dissociates, which is common, especially for someone who's experienced the level of trauma that she has, and has protected her a lot. For example, she doesn't remember the altercation I had with my dad on the stairs about my son sleeping. She just has blacked that out from her memory. My sister and I have a lot of memory gaps, and now we know it's because we're not present. And that's another thing, is like I'm staring into some mid space and my brain is like da 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 da, and like tuning out. Now I recognize like the physical symptoms of dissociation is like breaking. I have a hard stare. My husband now, actually, like game changer, is he's been in therapy as long as I have now, and we work through so much of this stuff together, but he's noticed when I dissociate. And that is so helpful because he'll pull me out of it, and he notices. He will now say like, Micah, like something triggering you, and he'll kind of like bring me back to the present. And that, like having an outside voice to recognize it in the moment. And this has just been in the past couple years that like he's very perceptive, but we'll go for a walk or something and like change my state, move my body, and allows me to come back. But man, I spent so long dissociating, and for long periods of time, it got me through a lot of really difficult times parenting when I feel like overwhelmed, right? But like can't really parent very well from a state of dissociation.
No, but no, I felt that, especially when you're talking about the stare. That stare to me is so comforting. It just feels so good. And I don't know how else to explain it. So it's really nice to hear you talking about that. I'm sorry you experienced that, but it's so beautiful that you have a partner who can understand and recognize those signs. It is incredibly helpful, a lot more than trying to navigate it on your own. I know I did a lot of trauma therapy before I met my husband, and it's not like I was a master by any means, but I reached like a pretty good point where I felt like I was doing really well. And then I met my husband, and then I realized that there's like relational healing that needed to happen. And there's extra healing within relationships because of those things. You have an outside observer who knows you really, really well, who knows your day-to-day behaviors and habits and can sense that change. It really helps.
And that's what is so interesting about being in a long-term relationship or an intimate relationship when you have experienced relational trauma, is that like, I remember being so frustrated by this, but if you've experienced relational trauma, like from your adults and caregivers, like the only way to really heal from that is with a relationship. And so like when you choose a partner, like their default, the person, de facto person you're going to be healing with. And like, that's, oh my gosh, it's so, I just think like my husband, Eric, is so patient. Eric, if you're listening to this, I love you so much. You're a very patient man. It's been 10 years. And yeah, like he has, to his credit, just been like the stable rock, like consistent. And that was like, my therapist has said, I think it's like incredible that you chose him at 22 because you're so young, but you like chose a person who had it within him, like everything that you needed to learn to heal or be the stable base for me to start healing. And I was like, thank goodness.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a good guy.
How can parents, or how do you break cycles of emotional neglect, criticism, or perfectionism? Like what helps you to, when you notice it or you're repeating those patterns, how can you break that?
I think, okay, so a generational pattern that I really wanted to interrupt was anger and like threatening my child and him being afraid of me. And that was something that like when I got pregnant with him, I was terrified because I was like, I have to figure out how to be a parent without, I would rather die than raise a child to be afraid of me. And I was always afraid I was going to like lose my temper. And one of my parents told me, it's inevitable. You're going to lose it on your child. And I made it the commitment to myself that no matter what happens, I will never hit, threaten, scare my kids so that they like know the sound of my footsteps coming and they climb up. And that was like the extreme. But emotional neglect is so much sneakier because it's the lack of something. And so like telling my son that if he's feeling really sad or scared, just like get over it, just stop, like be quiet. That is an emotional neglect and like shutting down your child. And so I have to notice that if he's feeling really emotionally needy, that sometimes I will get triggered and I have to notice that it's making me anxious first so I can kind of like get myself under control. Sometimes that's just like box breathing. Sometimes it's like, okay, I need to just get us moving. Like I used to just put him in the stroller and walk after I could meet his emotional needs, right? And then speaking to him the way that I needed to be spoken to. It came naturally to some extent, but it took all my effort to, especially when I was feeling anxious, triggered, reactive, overwhelmed, speaking to him and just responding instead of reacting took all of my energy. But it's really like giving him the things that I didn't have, like we were talking about. It's the hardest thing to validate his feelings because I never really had anybody do that for me. But validating his emotions is both healing and redemptive because then I actually like it's a beautiful cycle. I think that when we're able to, and you said this earlier, like you learn how to validate your child's emotions to say, it's okay to be scared. I'm here with you. I'm big enough to hold your feelings. You're afraid to get on the chairlift when we're skiing. That totally makes sense. It kind of goes fast. Like I've been afraid of that too. It's okay to feel nervous. I'm right here with you. Nobody talked to me like that in my life. So like figuring out that that was a skill and then like, but once you do it for your child, you can do it for yourself. And I'm like in that stage of trying to speak to my inner child. And I've done a lot of work on that in a way that feels like deeply spiritual. But yeah, I think that's what the cycle breaking looks like for me.
I can relate to that. And I think it's so powerful. I don't know if you've had this experience where your child starts to say those comforting and validating things back to you. Like if I'm crying, my my sons will come up to me and they'll be like, Mama, are you sad? And they'll like, let me rub your eyes. It's okay. I'm right here. I'll sit with you. And I'm like, oh my God. Like,
who raised you?
Yeah, like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that my heart stops in those moments. And my son's 6. He's like now now getting to the point where he's developmentally like a little bit more able to, especially when kids are really young, like 2 or 3, humans are egocentric and they're not really thinking about other people, right? And now that my son's 6, like he's able to see outside of himself a little bit more, and kids at that age start to practice more empathy. And I can see it with when he's with one of my best friend's daughters, and she's almost 2, and he is like so careful and like sweet and comforting to her. And I'm like, oh, there's a person who's smaller than he is, and he's talking to her the way that I talk to him. And it's like, oh my God, I've done something right. Thank God.
Honestly, those are the moments that help get me through too. I know one of the things that helps me both break cycles and with self-compassion, I had a therapist that anytime I like slipped up or felt like I had a bad moment, she would like show me 2 paths. I'm trying to get on camera. She would show me 2 paths and she's like, okay, so maybe you and your mom started out here and your mom kept going this way and this way with every choice that she made, and you've gone this way and this way and this way, and you make a misstep, like you go slightly towards her, but you're not all the way over here. Like you're just right here, and you can repair and you can apologize and you can keep moving further away from her path. And that was like so relieving and comforting for me to visualize, because I'm like, okay, I am not her. I am not where she was. I will never be where she was. It would take me a long time and a huge series of bad decisions to get back to her path. Like I can correct, I can redirect, I can apologize and repair, and I can choose to be different.
Yeah. And it really is in those moments of rupture and repair. Like when we do make a mistake. And just last night, my son at the dinner table with our friends, he was like, Mama, when I'm asking someone else a question, you answer it sometimes. And I was like,
Oh,
I felt so called on the carpet. Yeah. He is a very articulate child. He's also very decisive and yeah, he's very articulate. And in that moment, I'm like feeling called out, especially because we're with some of our best friends. And I'm like, oh, damn. Okay. And they don't have kids. So like you're calling me out. But in that moment, I have to like stop, just pause for a second and be able to say, you're right. Because like owning it and the adult taking responsibility is what frees the child to know like, oh, this wasn't about me. I'm not the problem. My adult is. So saying like, I'm so sorry. You were right. I did do that. And like learning that. And I love that visual of like your paths are diverging. Like, yeah, when he was 2, it was like, okay, I'm going to have to start making these choices. And every time that I chose to do something differently, like my childhood, his childhood, my husband too, we're raising our son very differently from how he was raised and me. And owning our mistakes and apologizing is one of the most drastically different things that my child is experiencing that I didn't. And in lieu of that, I always assumed or knew or was told that I was the problem, that I was bad and defective and lazy and weak. But it helped me so much to understand through trauma therapy, my therapist reminding me that after you rupture with your child, like, okay, I was answering questions he was asking his dad. Rupture, if you do the repair, like your relationship is actually stronger than if before the rupture occurred. And I'm like, okay, that is so empowering. It's not that you can't make mistakes, but it's like taking responsibility for it and teaching them to say sorry. Like that's such a skill and something that I was so bad at. Like when I was first dating my husband, like I could never own up to my mistakes. I would just like cold shoulder.
Yeah.
So toxic. Had to learn it.
And you're modeling that, and that's really incredible.
It's so hard and uncomfortable, but it showed up in our marriage too, like being able to teach my son to apologize. I got better at it in adult relationships.
Yeah. No, totally. That relational healing.
Yeah, totally.
If you could go back and tell your younger self anything about your mother wound, what would it be?
Ooh, this is an interesting question because I have revisited my past self. And this is something that when my therapist first suggested this, she calls ego state work. I was like, ridiculous, woo woo, but I'm just gonna like, I'm a people pleaser, right? So I'm just gonna like sit through it and do what she says, even if it's not going to do anything. And she had me, and we've done this many times since, but close my eyes and imagine walking down the hallway to my childhood bedroom, which in itself was triggering and uncomfortable, and then like see my child self in my room, and as my adult self be in her presence and eventually approach her and talk to her and tell her the same things that she needed to hear. And I like sobbed doing this activity, and we've done it over and over and over. And it took a long time for me to imagine that my child self, who was 4, 5 years old in these exercises, finally would open up and trust me, adult self, to like hold her hand and talk to her And eventually I was able to tell her the things that she really needed to hear. And those are, you are not bad and you don't have to do anything to earn love. You don't have to be anyone's emotional caretaker. You don't have to be perfect. You should be loved just because you are. And your emotions are valid. And it is not wrong to be anxious or scared or mad. And you shouldn't be punished for those things or shamed for those things. And you're allowed to need things, like very basic things, is like the feeling of emotional and psychological safety. It was such a corrective experience. And it became like a very deeply spiritual thing. And I still have to do that because it does feel like it heals something. Maybe my adult in my life at that time when I was 4 or 5 were not able to give me that. They were doing their best. They weren't able to give me that, but I'm the adult that I've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
And
Beautiful.
like it healed pieces of me. And so I go back her and tell her the things that I tell my son now. And it's easier to do that because like as a mom, I know what I'm supposed to tell my child
Mm.
and she's receptive to it now. And it's like, is this time travel? This is
Yeah.
so weird. Yeah, it feels like time travel.
Yeah.
But it's healing me in real time, I think.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. What's
Thank you.
one piece of encouragement that you'd offer to anyone struggling with their mother wound right now? This episode is
Ooh,
going to go out around Mother's Day, and that was a really triggering time before I had kids for me because I'd see everybody celebrating and out and about, and it was just never a day of celebration for me. It was a day of mourning almost. So I'm hoping to kind of honor people in that space with this episode. So I kind of want to leave it off with a little bit of encouragement for anybody struggling with that.
ooh, I love that. Yeah, you weren't gonna go like to Target and get a card from the Mother's Day aisle and like, yeah, didn't fit. Again, I'm coming at this from someone who's just been through trying to heal my mother wound and I'm in progress, work in progress. I think if it feels really confusing and hard to think about my mother hurt me, she wounded me, it's not about blame. And like we get really conflicted because especially speaking as an eldest daughter, we're supposed to have this loyalty to our adults, even if they hurt us. But it's not disloyal to address the ways that you weren't given the things that you needed to thrive, to survive. And it's not about blame because it can be true that your mom did the best that she could and she loved you the best that she could and she wasn't able to give you what you needed. And like, yeah, that those things are not mutually exclusive and that you don't have to do anything to be lovable. And to be realistic, and this is something that was really hard for me, is that your mom may never be able to give you what you need now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's going to have to be okay because if a part of us is always stuck waiting to hear what we need to hear from our mom and she isn't able to give you that because she's not here
Mm-hmm.
or because she's emotionally not available or she has her own work to do, then God, that's the beautiful thing about reparenting yourself is that you're the adult that you always needed. You're the person you've been waiting for all along. You can tell those things to yourself, which sounds crazy, but like we have the power to heal our own wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And with the support of hopefully a partner, a friend, a therapist. And I feel like my personal Bible is Adult Children of Immature Parents book. And so I found a lot of, I think we really start by like being validated.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're hearing this and you're hearing someone describe mother wounds and it feels very, like it resonates very deeply, we can first just say like, it can be true that my mom did her best.
Mm-hmm.
She loved me the best she could. And she didn't give me what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not disloyal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad and also freeing to be like, it wasn't enough for me and I can give myself more than she could. And
Yeah.
that's been the most powerful thing for me. Sometimes it's really sad to recognize that. And it does hurt sometimes, but to know that I, like you said, I'm the adult that I always needed and I can do more than she ever could. And that's, no blame there. It's just I'm more capable. And my mother wound has made me stronger in that way and has made me more aware and intuitive and nurturing and loving. And through healing and lots of healing and therapy work, it can end up being kind of one of your strengths, turning your pain into a strength or a purpose or a power.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Yeah.
So I don't think if I hadn't become a mother, I don't know that I could have like begun healing this. And it makes at least me, and I think from what you said, you too, Brianne, that healing a mother wound made me a lot more intentional of mother than I would have been otherwise and sensitive. And like through some alchemy of your like genes or just the person that you are, like you're a cycle breaker.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredibly powerful. Like, what a legacy.
Just because you were strong enough to acknowledge it and feel it and take on that pain and do the healing work that nobody else before you could do.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you. That's yeah, it's so hard. And I hope anybody listening to this, I hear you, I see you if this is resonating. And it is so helpful to hear other people talk about it.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
This is such a great conversation. In our final part of this Mother Wound series, Micah will return to share essential women's wisdom, the things many of us never learned from our mothers, from setting boundaries to caring for our bodies and minds. It's the guidance you deserve, no matter your story. I'll see you in the next episode.